Well, my experience with schizophrenia is very religious, and I wasn't brought up religiously at all. So I don't know in my earlier life what instigated it. I started believing I was a prophet. Later on, I started actually believing I was Jesus Christ. And I started believing that I was communicating directly with God. And I was developing very crazy notions that the devil was trying to train me to find good souls for him. So I developed this idea that um, people, that the devil is represented on the left hand and God is represented on the right. So I had this notion that if people were working with their hands, whatever hand they finished on was who they were doing the work for. So I started concentrating on people's hands and watching them and seeing what what hand they finished on. I was hearing voices in my mind as well. Like if I'm watching the news, I would hear hear put downs like you're nothing, you'll never do anything, like we're gonna get you, we're gonna kill you, you should kill yourself, things like this.
Before we got him into the Clark, we pretended as a family that it was pretty thin pretense. Anyway, we pretended as a family that we all had to go to family counseling because we had issues because that he was refusing absolutely to see anyone. So we all traipsed into the psychiatrist and pretended to have family problems so the psychiatrist could talk to Jesse. And then, unfortunately, the next time that Jesse was supposed to go back himself, he decided he wasn't going because there was nothing wrong with him.
First, complete denial, right? Like I was communicating with God. I didn't have a mental illness. And then, I was just out of control. I was, screaming at the top of my lungs, walking down Yonge Street saying, join the rich businessmen and the wankers, or join Jesus the people, And I was just, out of control. Whether it was that or whether it was me, lying in my bed all day long, going nowhere, or it was me in my room laughing demonically because it's really tough when you have these things bombarding you on your head.
So, and then as a family, of course, we had to collect kind of all the information to get him into the Clark in the first place, not to mention just trying to keep him safe.
So when I deteriorated, my mom in particular put an affidavit together, a legal document listing all my symptoms, and sent it into the Justice of Peace, the head judge in mental health court.
As it happens, we had enough evidence that it wasn't too difficult, but it was incredibly difficult to send your kid to the Clark in handcuffs. I mean, we had to make the arrangements once the authorization was granted to have the cops come and pick him up.
I was interviewed at the back door of the Clark, and I was so out of it, I thought, oh yeah, they're going to interview me and then, let me go. But they didn't, and I was admitted. And I spent 3 months on the 10th floor, CIU, Clinical Investigation Unit, which is where they bring people who have suffered their first break, right? Which is the first time you're experiencing psychosis.
My first reaction was that it's a death sentence. And then I got even more angry and said, no, it's a life sentence. And it took 3 or 4 years until he started to really become normal again. So it's a long, hard road.
Schizophrenia is the prototypical serious mental illness. It has an incidence of about 1 in 100 lifetimes, so 1 in every 1% of the population will suffer from schizophrenia.
It was different for everybody, I think. I know, like, there was a lot of fighting and a lot of basically nobody understanding what their role was and how to act towards each other and towards him, and if we're supposed to be, you know, placating Jerry's behavior, or if that's enabling him or what. So for a while, it was really difficult for the whole family to figure out how to deal with Jerry and how to treat him. I think for everybody, we were all really scared and upset and worried. It was, you know, none of us had ever dealt with anything like that before.
Society's view of schizophrenia today, I think, has changed somewhat from when we were first founded in 1979, but I don't think significantly. I think today people still see schizophrenia as something to be feared. I think the things that we see in the media, the things that we hear on television, we never hear the good news. We never hear how well people are doing. And oftentimes people are doing so well that we don't know that they even have schizophrenia, or that's the illness they're living with.
We don't really hear about the good stories about people who experience schizophrenia. We hear more of the stories of the people who might have, you know, maybe had inconsistent treatment when it comes to schizophrenia, or in some cases, no treatment at all.
I think the fear comes from some of the incidences that are quite real, that we often hear about in the newspaper, on television, in the media, but we fail to understand that that is not the norm, and that, like other illness areas, things fall outside the norm, and there are things that are part of the norm.
When we talk to people one-on-one and we say, you know what, that's not really the case. People with schizophrenia are no more violent than the rest of the population. In fact, they're less violent. And in fact, people with schizophrenia are 40% more likely to commit suicide. So really the fear and the worry should not be that they're going to hurt somebody else. The fear should be about, what if they hurt themselves?
Unfortunately, it is true that a very small minority of people with schizophrenia can act violently. That's almost always when they are people who are off their medication treatment, and often people who are not only off medication treatment but abusing street drugs.